A variable is an element used to store a value. That means whose value will be changed during the execution of a program. So it is an element used to store a value in a program while the programming is running. So we can also call it as it is a name area in a memory which holds the temporary data. It is used to hold a temporary data, and the variable value will be changing during the execution of a program. So Visual Basic Code works in two modes. One is the implicit and another one is the explicit mode. In implicit mode, there is no need to declare a variable. It does not. This mode does not require any variable declaration. Whereas in case of this explicit mode, we must compulsorily declare a variable. It requires the variable declaration. So we can declare a variable by using a dim statement. Dim is nothing but dimensional statement. So in explicit declaration, in explicit mode, compulsory we must declare a variable. This variable can be declared by using the dim statement, dimension statement. The syntax of this dim statement is dim. First of all, we must give the variable name as data type. The data type, the value that we are stored in a variable, we must specify the data type of that particular value, whether it is an integer or a string, like that. So for example, here we are having dim length as integer. So this integer is a data type in VB and length is a variable name. So like that we can declare a variable. First, suppose we want to declare a variable in string. So dim is nothing but dimension. Greetings is the variable name as string. String is the data type in VP. Here explicit declaration and implicit declaration. So explicit declaration is nothing but declaring a variable by typing dim statement and a variable name. So previously we have discussed a dim variable name as data type, and implicit declaration is nothing but declaring a variable without the dim statement. So we won't use the dim statement. Simply we will use the variable as its own. That means directly we will give the variable name and store a value. So for example, if you want, I want to store last name is equal to Fernandez. This Fernandez is the name. It is a string. That's why we have kept double quotes. So if you want to store a single code characters, I mean a single letter one character. If you want to store a single character, we will give the single quotes. If you want to store an integer value directly, there is no need to give a single quote or a direct double quote. Directly we can give some a is equal to 3. So 3 is an integer, no need to give any single or double quotes. So a single quote symbolizes to store a single character, and double quotes symbolizes to store a string character. Strings, it symbolizes to store the strings. So in explicit, compulsorily we must give the dim statement along with the data type, whereas in case of in implicit there is no need to give the data type, directly we can store. That is the explicit declaration and implicit declaration. That is the difference between the explicit declaration and the implicit declaration. Next, what are the different variable types? So numeric variable, it stores the numerical values. String variable, it stores the text, one or more characters. That means it stores the string. Variant, it stores any type of data. We can store any type of data. That means we can store the Boolean value, we can store the string value, we can store the numeric value. That means no need to give any data type. Automatically, by default, if you want to declare any data type for a variable in VB, directly it will take it as a variant data type. That is the default data type in Visual Basic. So numeric is used to store the numerical values, string is used to store the string values. That means you can store the text, where variant is used to store any type of data. Boolean variable type is used to store true or false. And date is used to store the dates, whatever dates, date of joining, date of birth, date of death, whatever dates if you want to store, we will use the date variable. Next, object, it is used to store different types of objects. That means we can store any types of controls, we can store any types of tools. by using this object variable type. These are the different data types, variable types that are used in VB. So implicit and explicit. Here is small declaration, example for implicit and explicit. So first of all, we will see the example of implicit. So if you want to write a VB program, we will write a public sub or private sub VB implicit. This is the VB implicit is the function name we are having. X equal to 5, I am taking x equal to 5 and y is equal to hello and sub. So if you observe this one, x is a variable and y is a variable. There are two variables in implicit example. So we didn't any declared by using this dim statement. We have not used any dim statement to declare a variable x or y. Directly we are storing a value 5 and hello. So for x equal to 5 means here we are storing integer value. 5 is an integer value, we are storing it in x, and hello is a string text, that means we are storing it in a double quotes. Previously I have said that if you want to store any string value, we will use the double quotes, or if you want to store any character value, that means a single letter, we will use the single quotes. Here we are using the text, that means it is a string value, that's why we have used this double quotes. So we didn't any declared any data types here. When compared to that of explicit example, see here, option explicit, public sub VB explicit function we have using dim x as integer, y as string. Here we are declaring the variables. So whereas in case of implicitly in implicit example we didn't declare the variable. So in explicit we have declared a variable dim x as integer and y as integer, and we are storing a value as x equal to 5, y is equal to hello, like that. So this x is called as an integer variable. This x is called as an integer variable and y is called as a string variable. So because it is storing a string value, that's why we are calling it as a string variable. Here x equal to 5 means we are storing an integer value. That's why we are calling x as an integer variable. Whereas in case of this explicit example, we didn't give any data type. So by default, it will take it as variant data type. A variant data type. So what is a variant data type? It is used to store any type of data. This variant data type is a default data type which is used to store any type of data. So that is the difference between an implicit and explicit. Here, implicit default VB mode, x and y stored as variants. So implicit is a default VB mode, whereas in case of explicit, x can only store integer values, y can only store string values. So like that the explicit differs, and always use explicit mode, it reduces errors. So better to use the explicit mode, that means better to declare the variables of its data types when you are writing a VB coding. Scope of a variable. So elements scope is its accessibility in your code. So we are having 4 scopes of a variable. So one is the block scope, another one is the procedure scope, next one is the module scope, and the namespace scope. So first of all we will see about this block scope. So this block scope is available only within the code block in which it is declared. So a variable, if you have declared any variable in its code block, then only we will give the declaration of a variable is in only block scope. So available only within the code block in which it is declared. It will be live only in that particular block. Next to procedure scope. So this procedure scope is available only within the procedures in which it is declared. So procedures and functions are different. So when we have declared a variable in a procedure, then it is called as a procedure scope. Next, module scope. So it is available to all codes within the module, class or structure in which it is declared. So when you have declared a variable in a module scope, that variable can be used in a modules, it can be used in a classes, and also anywhere in a program we can use that particular variable. So that scope is called as a module scope. Next is the space scope. Name space scope. So this namespace scope is available to all codes in the namespace. A particular namespaces, a particular places. In a particular places only that particular variable will be available. So that is the scope of a variable. The variable can be present in 4 scopes: block, procedure, module and namespace scope. So here we are having 2 codes here. I am having 2 forms. One is the form 1 and the other one is the form 2. So in form 1 I have declared some variables. Form 1 variables I have declared. So sub 1 variables, sub 2 and sub 2 variables. So here in form 2 we have declared only the code. There is no need, here we didn't declare any coding. I mean here we didn't declare any variables. So whereas in case of in form 1 we have declared a variables, those variables can be used in the form 2. That is the scope. So here we see the same variable x is in the on the right side of this PPT. We have declared some, we have written some small code. So dim x as integer, we have declared a variable x as integer and we have taken public sub first sub. This is the function name. So in this first sub, here we are having 2 functions. One is the first sub and another one is the second sub function. Here x equal to 5. And we have declared another variable dim y as integer and sub. Here above the first of all we have declared one variable x as integer. That means outside the coding, outside the block we have declared. Here within the block we have declared y also as integer. Here next public sub, in second sub function we have declared x equal to 6 and dim y as integer. So there is no declaration in both the functions for x. So x has declared at the top itself x as integer. That means in both coding and in both functions we have declared only once of x. We have declared only once. Only dim x as integer at the top only we have declared. That particular variable can be used in both these functions. So the name variable x is needed in both subroutines and therefore it is defined as a global variable, right? So we have declared only once in x. So that variable is called as a global variable. The variable that we have declared in every subroutine, in every function is y. Okay, so y we have declared in first sub function and y we have declared in second sub function. That is called as a local variable. That can be called as a local variable. That means declaration outside the subroutines is the global and declaration within the subroutine is called as a local variable. So next there is a different local variable y for each subroutines. We have declared for each subroutine. That means we are having 2 subroutines, first sub and second sub. In both these 2 subroutines we have declared y. So that y is called as a local variable and x is called as a global variable. That is the scope of a variable. Next, constants. Coming into the constants. So previously we have discussed about this variable. We have said that variable is an element which is used to store a value and its value will be changing during the execution of a program. The value will be changing during the execution of the program. Whereas in case of constants are the elements that do not change their value during the execution of a program. It cannot be changed during the execution of a program. So the syntax of these constants are const, C-O-N-S-T, const, constant name as data type. This const is the keyword which is used to declare the constants. Const data type, constant name as data type. So if you want to declare a constants, a small example is there. Public const pi as double is equal to 3.14. We are storing here pi as a double. We are storing here pi as a double data type and we have stored a value 3.14. That means pi means 22 by 7 that we are storing here directly 3.14. So that is how to declare the constants. If you want to declare a variable, we will declare by using the dim statements. That means by using the implicit or explicit declaration. So whereas in case of this constant, if you want to declare a constant, first of all we must use the keyword const, and next we must give the constant name as, and next data type we must give. So that is the difference between a variable and a constant. So data types. So a programming language describes that what type of data a variable can hold. So when we declare a variable, we have to tell the compiler about what type of data the variable can hold or which data type the variable belongs to. So first of all, we must tell the VB that what is the data that we want to hold. What is the data? What is the type of a data that we want to hold? And next we must give the what is the variable name that the data must be held. Okay. So if you want to see the data types in VB, here is the small tabular format. Here data type, size in bytes, how much size it occupies in the memory. So here we are having byte. Byte is one of the data type which occupies 1 byte in memory. So a byte is used to store 8-bit unsigned integer. It stores an 8-bit unsigned integer. And next char. So it occupies 2 bytes in memory. It stores 16-bit Unicode characters. Integer, it occupies 4 bytes. So 32-bit signed integer. And double, it occupies 8 bytes. And long, it occupies 8 bytes. Short, it occupies 2 bytes. Single, it occupies 4 bytes. String means it varies. So if you want to store 4 characters, it will store 4 bytes. If you want to store 10 characters, it stores 10 bytes, like that. So next, date data type, that means it stores 8 bytes. Boolean, true or false, it stores 2. It holds the size of this particular Boolean type is 2. Now object, it holds 4 bytes in memory. It occupies 4 bytes in memory. And decimal, it occupies 16 bytes in memory. Decimal, it occupies 16 bytes in memory. So these are the different data types that are available in VB. Access specifiers. Coming into the access specifiers. So we are having 4 types of access specifiers. So one is the public, and the one is the private. Next is the protected one, and the last one is the friend access specifier. Friend function, we can also call it as a public. So this public gives variable public access, which means that there is no restriction on their accessibility. So if you want to access a variable, when it is declared a public, we can access any variable from anywhere. We can access any variable from anywhere. That means there is no restriction on their accessibility. When coming into the private, it gives variable private access, which means that they are accessible only within their declaration content. So if you want to access only at a particular places, then we must give the private access. Next, protected. Protected access gives a variable accessibility within their own class or a class derived from the other class. So if you want to access a variable only at a particular class, in only at a particular class or a subclass, a class that was derived from the another class is called as a subclass. So if we want to access there, then we must declare a variable as a protected variable. We must declare a variable as a protected variable. Whereas in case of friend access, in case of friend access, it gives a variable friend access, which means that they are accessible within a program that contains their declaration. So if you declare a variable and if you use the friend access, then we can access within the program. Then we can access we can access a variable within the program. Those are all the 4 types of access specifiers to access a variable, to use a variable. Next, we are having one statement known as option explicit. Option explicit. The option explicit or option statement, we can also say it as option explicit or option statement, is used to set a number of options for a code to prevent syntax and logical errors. This statement is used to prevent the syntax and logical errors in VB coding. So this statement is normally the first line of the code. First of all, the first line of the code of a VB program is option explicit or option strict we can give, or option compare we can give. That is the first line of the option statement. So the option values in VB are as follows. So generally when you are writing a VB programming, compulsorily we will write option explicit or option strict or option compare. So these are the three options available in Visual Basic. So first of all, we will see about this option explicit. So when option explicit is set to on, so this can be kept as an or we can also keep it as an off. When it is kept in on, this requires to declare OR variables before they are used. Option explicit statement is nothing but whatever variables that we are using in coding, that means we are using in programming, compulsorily we must declare at the top of the program, including their data type. So if you kept it as on, compulsorily we can declare the variables. So we can make it as off also. First of all, we must go option explicit, that means we are making it as on. So default the option explicit will be on. So this is about this option explicit. So tomorrow we will see about this some other coding programs. Thank you one and all.